East Long Meadow Public Schools School Committee meeting. It is October 22nd, 2018, 6 p.m. Call the meeting to order. This meeting is being both audio and videotaped today, and I would ask everybody to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call next. To my left, Jake, please.
Jake Brady, student rep.
Sarah Trulio.
Bill Fonseca.
Gregory Thompson, Vice Chair, sitting in for Mr. Pachero, who's out on a family matter today.
Gordon Smith, Superintendent of Schools.
Elizabeth Marcy Boucher.
Pamela Blair, Assistant Superintendent for Business.
Heather Brown, Director of Curriculum.
Okay, thank you. And we have our first order of business for the evening, minutes.
Move to approve the October 1st, 2018 regular session meeting minutes.
Motion made
Second.
and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries 4-0 tonight. Committee and subcommittee communications. Jake, please.
Sure. So last week at East Long Meadow High School was Spirit Week. For the rundown of the days, Monday was Pajama Day, Tuesday was Team Day, Wednesday was Class Color Day, Thursday was USA Day, and Friday was Red and Gray Day. From my perspective, the majority of students participated and school spirit levels were high. So that was really good. And then Friday of Spirit Week was the debut of our new Spartan Block activities program. And students were given their first opportunity to participate in an activity of their choice. And from what I've heard, a lot of students really enjoyed their activities, and this program is continuing. I believe we have our next one November 2nd.
Do you have a couple examples of the type of activities?
Yeah, so one of the programs I heard a lot about was acoustic jam session with Mr. Freeman, and they just played on instruments during the 41 minutes or whatever it was, and yeah, it was
Jammed.
Yeah.
You can say it.
People who might not get the opportunity through instrumental music or so forth now could actually sit in and connect. Great.
Yeah. And then immediately after these activities that day, students headed down to the auditorium for the pep rally. So originally, as I reported here a few weeks ago, we were planning on having the pep rally inside the large gym. However, it came to our attention that the maximum occupancy of the large gym is 800 people, so it turned out to not be a feasible option. But we still made the best of it, and the theme of good vibes only was resonated through the performances. And Mr. Martin actually hosted a game of musical chairs with volunteers from the audience, so I thought that was really fun and interesting, and overall everyone had a good time. And then senior semi was held Saturday night at St. Luke's Church. There was a turnout of just shy of 180 people.
Wow,
So
that's great.
participation was high, and overall it was a good night. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you, Jake. Sarah?
I was able to meet with Gordon and Pamela last week to begin conversations regarding the para negotiations. So after that meeting, Gordon was able to reach out to the paraprofessionals. So now we're just firming up some dates.
Yeah. Actually, you're
begin
going
our
to meet on
conversations.
Wednesday. So we have a meeting set for Wednesday, November 6th, I believe, and 16th are the 3 dates right now we have confirmed.
Great. Okay, thank you. Bill?
This Saturday, I'm hosting a Division 5 meeting at the Collaborative for Educational Services in Northampton with 2 topics, a resolutions clinic, going over all the resolutions, and the second topic, which is garnering some interest, is the future of public education in the Pioneer Valley in regards to funding, since the state legislature dropped the ball on the Foundation Budget Review Commission's recommendations earlier this spring. So we're just trying to get a handle. We've got people coming down from the Berkshires to speak to everybody about how they're handling the budget shortfalls that everybody's running into due to the increase in health insurance and just a general increase in the cost of doing business to educate our kids these days. So we're expecting a big turnout for that. There's also a rally after that to garner support against the expansion of the Pioneer Valley Chinese Immersion Charter School up in Northampton, the Northampton Amherst area. So, Open Space Committee has been meeting regularly, and we're working our way through that plan to submit to get this town eligible for grants. So,
That'll be an actual, here's what we're gonna do with this specific piece of property kind of thing? Is that what the plan will be?
It's not that
not
specific, but
that
it's,
specific.
specific.
It's identifying open space in the
Okay.
town.
and it identifies objectives and goals
Yep.
for the town as
Yep.
they continue to move forward.
It's been a long time since there's been an open space committee.
Since about 2000,
Yeah.
somewhere in that. And this is a plan, we're not reinventing the wheel, we're using the same plan, just updating it. We've got consultants from the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission working with us. We get an allotment of hours that we can use them for,
Right.
so we're on target to get this thing done, hopefully by the end of the year, which is what everybody's looking
For the
for.
town to be eligible for certain grants, we
Yeah.
have to have
Open
an
space.
active
Yeah.
plan.
That makes sense. Okay, great, thank you. Beth?
First, I went last Thursday with Mr. Smith to the Willie Ross Gala. They were honoring Greg Delisle, who has been part of our school system through Willie Ross for over
Many
20
years,
years, right?
yeah.
Many, many years. And he had quite the career.
30
And
or so.
yeah, he's really, was very instrumental with just helping Willie Ross become successful, solvent, and moving forward. And he's actually going to be their outreach director, which will probably give him just as much work to do. But he's supposedly retired, but he isn't. So
Yeah.
that was nice to go to. Also, I went to the 125th birthday meeting. It was the first one I went to, so I was just kind of getting a feel for that.
Yeah, what'd you find out?
They've got a lot of things they want to do, a lot of things. They want to do everything from like a baseball game to maybe having a dance toward the 1st of July, which is the actual birthday of the town. It'll be a better parade. I think the fireworks they're thinking about trying to upgrade. And there was just some decisions as to whether or not, some different suppers throughout the year, whether or not, are we fundraising for things, are they not fundraising for things? So I think they were still working out, but there was a lot of enthusiastic people, and they
great.
have some good ideas. And some of these folks have been on other birthday committees, which is very impressive to me, so. And,
Prior birthday. committee.
prior
Excellent.
birthday, yep, and so,
That's
on November 6th, Ely's gonna start opening up their grants requests, and we're gonna have a speaker come in from Ely for the morning of the convocation to talk to them.
Professional
And-
development.
Professional development, thank you, and try to get that, up and moving, a little bit quicker this year, so.
Great, thank you. Okay, we'll just jump right in then. We're gonna go to 5.1.1 for new state accountability system.
Okay, so we do have a new state accountability system, so I wanted to give you an overview of it. And it's actually a very timely meeting to do it, because in the next meeting, you'll have the entire leadership team here presenting our goals, SMART goals for the district and for the buildings, and how we plan to move forward this year. Mrs. Brown is joining me tonight to go through this, and this is our title, but I think you'll see Reaching All Students is at least how we're seeing this accountability system as it starts to get looked at and discussed this year in its first year of existence. It seems to have this as an underlying theme. Certainly the commissioner, at least the times that I've seen him, seems to be echoing this same theme, that it's about what's going on in our classrooms, and it's about reaching all students. And so we think our goals that you'll see, as I said, next meeting, connect with this. You've seen drafts, and then you'll see everything next meeting.
So you
So-
should introduce Ms. Brown, she's new.
I'm sorry, I thought. I
Well,
had
she's
done
not
that.
new to us, but
Mrs.
she's
Brown, our
new to the-
Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment, is here tonight to help us go through this and
Just in
understand
case,
this.
you know,
Yeah, thank
anybody
you for
bothers to
keeping me on
watch
my
us.
toes.
Well, she was formerly the acquisition.
She's been with us for 8 years, right? I
Yep.
believe this is the 8th year. Yeah. And she was our first ever academic coach, and she was academic coach for literacy for ELPS. And she's did a fantastic job there, and she's doing a fantastic job in this new role, and certainly keeping me on my toes.
That's good.
That's always good to hear.
I can use that kind of support. So jumping right in, just quickly, this is more or less just an informational page to break it down. Actually, I believe this was a press release that DESE used and then also said districts could use for parents. But quickly said, the accountability system is really looking at a number of things that it always has looked at. This is not something new in terms of having an accountability system. We've really, since MCAS has been in place, we've had some type of accountability system throughout the state. And as different laws, No Child Left Behind, Every Student Succeeds Act is the newest version at the federal level, tweaks or full-blown new accountability systems come into play.
Is that new law, the last one you just mentioned?
Every Student Succeeds Act, that's a federal law.
Oh.
Yeah, and that's driving a lot of this.
When was that passed?
2 years ago.
Oh, I missed it.
But the implementation has just started to happen.
Well, this was the,
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
after effect of Every Child, No Child Left
Child
Behind.
Left Behind.
Right.
So this was the next generation of,
And we needed the next
Accountability.
generation. I mean, there are elements, as you know, as you have a good deal of experience looking at this stuff through school committee members' eyes. There needed to be a change. I'm not sure that any of these systems always take into account the challenges that ultimately get identified as we move forward. And so it's good that they look at it in different laws. They all have acronyms. So this one's ESSA.
ESSA.
yes,
However, in this accountability system, they're looking at achievement, which has always been done. So that's done through not only the next generation MCAS in grades 3 through 8, but the legacy, as they're calling it now, MCAS at the high school level. They're looking at student progress or growth. A couple new items. They've always looked at your graduation rate, but now they're looking at high school completion and actually allowing for, as you'll see as we go through the slides, for that 5th year, for systems to gain some points for keeping students engaged, and instead of seeing their dropout rise, their dropout percentage rise, keeping people engaged and earning their diploma, which dropout rate used to hurt us, still does hurt us. However, we never receive points for that 5th year cohort, so to speak.
The indicators are relative to other districts?
These are, no,
Some
it's
of
actually,
them, I
it's
suppose.
based on, it depends. As you look at achievement, yes,
the
there is
advanced
some
coursework.
comparison
Yeah.
with how other districts are scoring.
Right.
Growth certainly has an element of comparison around how students who have scored similarly
Right.
have done. However, obviously, your graduation rate and your dropout rate, that's really more of a comparison against your own, which is where we would like it to be, and I
Right.
think most districts would.
How do we compare in advanced coursework completion? Do you know, roughly?
There's not a comparison against other districts, it's
There's
just
not.
you'll see as we go through where we've earned points. You know,
Okay.
how they see us, what the percentage, and then what they do is they designate targets for us, which we really appreciate. That they continue to have that measure high.
They move the bar every time?
They move the bar every time, absolutely. And then something on the right side there that's very important to note with this system, and this is where we're feeling much more excited about the accountability system, is that they're forcing is probably a too strong a word. They're focusing each school district also not only on your aggregate achievement, but also looking at your lowest performing students. And interestingly enough, as we go through this, you'll see it's not necessarily the groups that have been reported in years past that you think would be there. And so this is where it becomes a little bit more of an even playing field, if you will, for suburban districts and urban districts. Because they're trying to focus back and look at how are your students doing in your district. There still is a comparative element which is driving some of this. The nice thing is, this is all going to be looked at throughout this year, and there may be changes if people provide enough feedback. And Commissioner Riley seems to be a commissioner who is listening, so that's nice to see. So in a little bit more detail, you see, okay, so achievement, so as I described in the first slide, that's really how we're doing on MCAS. Student growth, you've seen a lot of that over the years, and That's your growth percentile in ELA and math. Here's where there's been some expansion, high school completion, so you're still going to have your 4-year cohort graduation rate, but they're also going to look at how the 5-year cohort is working into that, and you can earn points in terms of the 1 through 4 that will come up later on. We'll explain that more as we go through this. Something that's also new is they're looking at how are your English language learners, or ELL, everything in education has an acronym, how are they progressing towards proficiency? And they look at English language learners are taking the Access assessment, and they set targets for them, and they're looking to see in 6 years how are they progressing towards proficiency. And off of the Access, they have targets that are set for them, and then obviously each district works and sets up a program with each individual student. This is a new one, and it's a good one because we've been concentrating on this for years, but chronic absenteeism, that is something where if they see that there are students who are missing 18 or more days, that's going to be something that draws attention now, not only in the accountability system, but certainly in just as DESE focuses and works with any district. And then something that you had mentioned, Mr. Thompson, advanced coursework completion. It's really looking at the percentage of 11th and 12th graders that are taking these advanced placement courses and completing them. Because we do have a number of people that enroll, but they may not complete the course. Nice thing is that we have seen over the last few years, even before this accountability system in place, we've seen an increasing number of people taking the advanced placement courses. The key now is taking and finishing. So what does that really mean? Well, it means that ultimately at some point, DESE or the state will be labeling, as they have done in the past, where they feel schools are. It might be a little softer or gentler label in that, similar to some of our next-gen MCAS scoring terms where they say meeting expectations or partially meeting expectations. Same thing for districts where you're meeting your targets or you're partially meeting your targets. Their ideal world would be that 85% of the schools in Massachusetts are somewhere between partially meeting and schools of recognition. Right now, the way it seems to have presented itself with the results from last spring is that there are really about 75% of the districts in Massachusetts sitting in partially meeting, and we are one of those districts. And so it's continuing to understand this process and obviously provide feedback to the state. So, you know, if there are things that we feel, well, that's maybe that could be a little fairer to districts when we look at this, that's feedback we want to provide them.
And the support is state support, the two
Yes, yeah.
categories?
So if you're in the two, so if you remember, it used to be level 1 through level 5. Level 5 obviously was a situation where you have immense state support, and in some cases you may have state control.
Right.
This is where you have the kinder, gentler. They're not saying that. And interestingly
Well, that would be
enough,
comprehensive, so I would imagine state control. to take
well, it's
control.
interesting. This commissioner did say he's not going to name any districts this fall or this school year for state control. He wants to see how this accountability system plays out for the year, what kind of feedback DESE gets throughout the year, and so then what changes might have to be made.
He's also said in meetings that I've attended that he's not really in favor of receivership as we know it now. He was a receiver in
And he was a
Lawrence,
receiver, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
so he knows, he's got a firsthand knowledge on how this works. So, you know, there may be receiverships down the road, but it might look entirely different than what's going on, let's say, in Hoyoke right now.
And he has, he's very candid about his time as a receiver in
Yeah,
Lawrence.
oh, he is.
So much so that they were a district, this was at the time when everybody was looking at district determined measures, which now have gone by the wayside. That was something that DESE was mandating. He didn't necessarily have that on the front burner as he
No.
tells the story in Lawrence as he went there. And there's good reason for that. First, you have to build culture, and that's where I think this accountability system is starting to really mesh with our goals. It's about understanding where your students are, where they've been, and how to work within that context to engage them in the best way possible.
I have a question.
Sure.
Now, not all school districts in grades did computer, but did the MCAS on?
Most
did?
were, yeah.
Certain
DESE is
grades
mandated,
or-
yep.
As of this year, or they all did?
Now everybody's in
Everybody.
it this year.
Okay.
The last few years, they've been ramping it up. We, in the first year, did more grade levels than we needed to.
Okay.
But last year, they had put it to, actually, I think we had the choice of leaving one middle school grade level out, but we were already testing 2 grade levels at the middle level,
Okay.
and so we figured we would put everybody on
All right.
computer-based testing.
I was just kind of curious if they were still comparing how the kids that were, I guess I feel the first couple of years, they do it on the computer.
There's-
I
there's-
know my kid didn't
certainly-
particularly care for it. I think
Right.
she sees there's merit in the future for it when you're used to it. But the first years, I think that,
There definitely is a piece to that, and it's something that has been discussed. I don't know if they have hard data on it in terms of,
What's funny about that, though, is that our sixth graders that was their first year they took it on the computers, and the sixth grade in general MCAS scores were great.
they did good, yeah.
So-
All right.
I think as more
but I
and
think
more they
across
become familiar with the
Massachusetts, there was,
platform.
As they do, yeah.
there was a worry about that.
Right.
Just adjusting to the mode of testing.
Right. I wasn't sure if some still weren't based on their
The-
statewide.
I mean, there's always a
you
way
know.
to present an extreme case.
Yeah.
And certainly DESE will listen to that. But more or less, they want you to follow their,
Okay, now I was just wondering if this 85% of schools, I'm just wondering, I wasn't sure if all of them were computer this year. You know what I mean? Because now it's all apples to apples as
Right.
opposed to
right,
last
Years
year where
past.
it was different.
certainly,
Okay.
good point. So this is how they weight each of the areas, or each of the indicators, if you will. It's not necessarily dissimilar incredibly from what they've done in the past. Achievement's always been weighted pretty highly. It's now more or less a 3-to-1 achievement versus growth. But they are adding in that English language proficiency, and then your additional indicators are 10%. Those additional indicators would be your graduation rate and so forth. If you do not have an ELL population, and interestingly enough, you have to have a cohort of at least 20. So in some cases in our schools, we have that, and in other cases, such as at our high school, at the moment, we don't. So if you do not, you see how on the right-hand side there of the slide, how they just increase the percentage for achievement and student growth.
Okay.
That was grades 3 through 8. And so our high school, this is now indicators for a high school. If you look on the right side there, you see without ELL, because right now ELHS does not have a cohort of 20 or more. So we would be following the weighting on the right-hand side there. That makes sense?
And the only reason why it says middle/high is if it was like a 7 through 12 model, which we don't have, so all of our other schools fall on the other.
Right. Good example would be Granby, I think, is a 7 through 12.
Yeah.
And East Hampton, who's getting a new building, they may have 6 through 12, like, possibly in their new building.
You say
Mrs. Brown-
quietly.
This is
New building.
new building. Mrs. Brown's going to take over and go into some more detail on how these cohorts and so forth are put together.
So Gordon had mentioned, Mr. Smith had mentioned before that, this is about reaching all students, and, it's always been about closing the achievement gap. But before, if the higher performing students didn't do as well, and the lower performing stayed the same, it looked like the achievement gap had closed, but really the intention is to get these kids up. So that's part of the reason why they've changed this criteria, so that the gap closing can really happen, because our lowest performing kids are doing better. And so he also mentioned that it's not necessarily those high needs kids that are labeled on the reports, and that would include English language learners, students with disabilities, economically disadvantaged. So that doesn't necessarily mean that the lowest performing kids are in those categories. So the idea is that every school is going to have lowest performing students, they just might look differently. And that's according to the achievement data, the bottom 25% of the kids in terms of their performance. And then this is just a little bit about how they came up with this group of students. For 3 to 8, they can have a cohort model because they are taking the, 3 through 8 has taken the next generation MCAS. So they can use those scores just for the last 2 years because that's only 2 years that we've done that assessment. So for a student to be in the lowest performing cohort, they have to be enrolled in the school for 2 years. They have to have tested in both 2017 and 2018, and they can't be a first or second year English language learner. And in terms of MCAS Alt, for those students who don't take the traditional MCAS, they're not part of this lowest performing cohort either. All of those categories do include, if they take the MCAS, they're for the aggregate, the whole group, but this is how they determine that lowest performing. And then they rank the kids and they find the lowest 25% based on their performance on the MCAS. The high school, it's a different model. The cohort model can't be used. It's always been a year-to-year comparison. It's because the students who enter in 9th grade, they don't take the test till 10th grade, so they don't have that 2-year comparison. But it's the same idea in terms of calculating that bottom 25%. And then Mr. Smith had also talked about these targets, and so the targets, how they set these targets, and they actually have elaborate rubrics for each indicator.
We do have those if anybody's interested.
We do. I made copies, you might want to go home and study
Quite
it.
elaborate.
And just to,
No, Heather's got them over there.
yeah, I can pass them around if anybody wants some, because if you want one, take one, if not, keep passing. The first thing I need to say is that the targets are only set for 1 year because they know this is a work in progress and they really have to figure out if they're working for everyone. So none of these are, they've said that none of these are they're going to tweak these most likely in the future. And again, it's set differently depending on whether the students took the next generation MCAS or the legacy MCAS. The legacy MCAS, we have data since 1998. But with the next generation, we only have 2 years of data. So basically, this criterion reference component, which means the progressing towards this target, they put schools into quartiles based on how we've performed in the past, regardless of the kind of MCAS, because they did 2013, 2016, just to group us together.
That's where your comparisons.
Yes. And then they looked at the schools that improved the most and decided to set the targets based on that improvement. So they looked at performance, but then of that performance, the ones that did the best, they wanted to set the targets based on that. So they set targets, and this pamphlet shows you all of the little minute targets that they set for everything. But they're trying to get that school that demonstrates positive change, what is it that they're doing, and trying to get other schools to have that same kind of goal.
It's somewhat similar to the growth formula, where your
Yeah,
growth is compared, like scoring students, and they look at that over the previous few years. Same idea. They lump the
Yes.
districts in the same way.
Right.
So I have another question, I should probably
Sure.
know the answer. So some took the new generation last year, and some took the legacy, or
Everyone-
everybody did new generation?
High school took
Through
legacy.
8th grade took
Right.
the next gen. The high school next gen hasn't come out yet.
Okay, got it.
So that's gonna change things in the future. So they used something, and they explained it in there in depth, their effect size modeling for the next generation, and then they just used the CPI change for the legacy because they had that data. And then in terms of growth, they switched from doing a median student growth percentile to a mean, And so any school that has a mean of 50 or student growth percentile of 50 or higher is considered meeting the target. So that's how they did growth. But like I said, each indicator has a rubric in here, and you'll see, I think you're going to talk about how we're talking half of a point percentage at some
That
times.
was just a, yeah.
Yes.
That was just my pet peeve, but I will make it public.
So this is just how they would break this down. This is for any school that would be a 3 to 8, so any of our 3 to 8 schools. And as you can see, there's total possible points based on those rubrics, and then you have your points earned. And the column on the left is all of the students, which is weighed 50%. And then they take the lowest performing students and do the same thing. Although the weighing is a little bit different because some of the things they don't have for lowest performing students, for example, science achievement, because the science is also a legacy MCAS. They don't have a next generation science for any grade yet. They don't have the English language progress because of, like I told you before, if they have kids who have been in the school, this country for only 1 or 2 years, they don't count that. But as you can see, after those weights are calculated, then they average the two weights together. So the lowest performing students actually count as 50% of our total target percentage.
And that's the 25%
The
lowest?
lowest 25%.
And they set targets based on, obviously, their previous scores. So we have a target in ELA for our aggregate students in these grade levels, and we have a target for our lowest performing students. And that's where you earn anywhere from 0 to 4 points.
And then they're weighed separately, and then they're averaged. And as you can see, the high school has more criteria, so it's a little bit different, the weighting's a little bit different. But again, those lowest performing students aren't going to get, let's see here, they don't get points for that whole 4-year cohort graduation rate, extended engagement rate, or annual dropout rate, because they don't necessarily include 11th and 12th graders, so you can't really obviously look at that kind of data in terms of their graduation rate if they haven't got to the point of needing to graduate yet.
Is this our data?
No, our data's coming.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
I purposely we give you an example so that you can look at how it's done, and
Yep.
then we'll look at the data, which is
Okay.
right now. Nope, I lied,
the-
it's next.
The lowest performing students can really weigh down all the rest of the students? Like, is that how I'm reading this?
It doesn't,
They're equal, so that it forces districts to focus in on and look at not only the aggregate, but also how are your students who have been struggling doing, and to dig in deeper, which is something that we've been doing for a number of years, but this actually will push everyone to look at and understand how are we engaging these students, what is keeping them from achieving. As you'll see when we get to our data, not only are our students doing quite well, lowest performing students in terms of hitting targets, that it's, as we said before, it's not necessarily the groups that one might immediately think, oh, okay, as I look at the data, I'm going to see X group or Y group being the reason why. Sorry, no
So when I'm
repetition.
looking, and it says all students 50%, lowest performing students 50%. So you had 100 students total in, say, the 3rd grade that took the test. When it says all students, say if it was just 25 were lowest performing, they all work in on the right side, and they're equated to 50%, even though 75 of the kids did well, 25 did performing low.
Targets are different, though,
They are.
yes.
Okay.
So,
and it's our
so-
accountability,
correct.
it's not
Yeah.
like dragging down anybody's scores.
So
The whole
they're,
idea- sorry.
they're gonna, no, that's okay.
No, that's all right, because I want to understand it.
They're creating targets based on how these students performed well, in this case, Next Gen MCAS, really just 2017 was your baseline.
And in theory, it's achievable,
In theory,
in theory.
yeah. And for the most part, we think, yeah, definitely is. The targets seem somewhat realistic, but I think we need to do some more work to look at them. You know, as Mrs. Brown was referring to, because we've had a number of conversations about this, there's one area where I'm thinking to myself, that's interesting, that's almost punitive And I'm sure you'll ask about it as we get to the data, and
I
I'll
got a
point
big
it out.
problem with them using our kids as guinea pigs, which I feel they do constantly, and I understand the need for proper, good, solid assessment.
Yeah.
But I see this kind of stuff and I'm saying, parents are, we're looking at it and it's different, every last couple of years,
Yeah.
it's different constantly.
Yeah.
And how do our kids know which end is up?
So
How do we
this-
know? Even looking at the MCAS scores this
Right.
year, I'm looking at them like, whatever, and I put it aside.
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
So that's different, so you get your student's MCAS report, you're gonna get the breakdown on your student as best
Right.
as they can. This is telling the district, hey, you've had a high aggregate, you guys think you're doing great, but look at these kiddos who are not making it. So it's just making all of the districts across Massachusetts say, it's great that your kids are achieving, what can you do differently, or what can you tweak to help all of your students get there? And again, it's not necessarily, it's in theory,
Right.
but the idea is to not ignore those kids. Not that we've been doing that at all, but I'm sure some districts, let's look at their data and say, we're doing great, we got 79%. Meanwhile, there's this chunk of kiddos who.
And-
But didn't we in the past, we'd get this whole thing that would say like which kids fell into this and we would pull them out? we'd have the coaches come in, we'd
We're
pull
still
them
working
out of
on that.
class.
Still,
Yep.
we'll still do that.
It's just that Massachusetts wants everyone to do that.
The
Yeah.
interesting piece, as we especially break out our data, is that that's always been sort of a very understandable reaction in terms of planning as you look at how people have scored, and then you may look at IEPs or so forth, and that's pretty straightforward. But the work we're doing, and you're seeing in our goals, and I think other districts,
Yeah.
I don't mean to exclude other districts, is around understanding our students even more so. And that's where the social emotional piece comes in. Because it's interesting, it's not necessarily situations with learning disabilities or other academic pieces that seem to be at the moment hindering some of our students. And so we need to do and be more overt about it with our staff in terms of giving professional development around it and just understanding other information
Okay.
that will help us hopefully engage students better and support them better.
Okay, I'm not trying to be different, I just,
No.
I see
No,
it and I
that's
think,
fine.
well, there's some school districts
This
that
is
people think of as, okay, I've got a
challenging to-
struggling student, I'm moving into this town,
Mm-hmm.
I'm putting my student in this town, so now you have the struggling student that's been brought into this town, and they're just here, they're not ELL, or, and they're here, and I know that districts, that people gravitate to certain districts, and I feel sometimes it's almost punitive to that, I'll be quiet. I'll keep
Well,
listening.
I mean,
But
you
know
have
what
a
I'm
couple
saying?
things in
I
this
feel
where
like
they're looking at-
critical of their assessment right
They're,
now.
they're not going to include in this students that have not been in the district for a certain amount of time. So they have reacted to that piece. I mean, that's a good
Okay.
point, and that's especially true in many of our urban districts. So you do have
They're
a
in and
high
out
degree of
constantly.
movement.
Yeah.
And so that's something that the department has listened to districts. It's been said for a number of years, but finally they're starting to put things in place.
All right. I'm good.
But that doesn't mean, there are other elements that we want to certainly provide feedback on, because no system is going to immediately be perfect if
Right.
it ever can attain
Right,
perfection.
and that's
I
why
know.
it's only for 1 year.
Right.
And that's why in the papers, when you looked at the number of districts in different categories, the majority were in partially meeting.
Right.
So if we get that, and that's really what the public sees,
Right.
we're not alone by any means.
Right.
Right.
Which actually is the next slide.
Okay.
So, similar to what I said at the beginning, this slide just shows you how they're categorizing schools and/or districts. And 75% is sitting in that partially meeting targets. I don't know if they envisioned that you would have a little bit more of an equal distribution amongst those three categories there. They would like to see 85% there, but 75% of that 85 is sitting in partially meeting. Go on are the levels 1 through 5, which maybe is a more damaging label.
And then the categorization of districts is no longer based on the lowest performing school. They basically take all of the information from all of the schools and use that to calculate,
Where the district.
well, we don't have an accountability percentile, but to basically put us in this, where we're at.
If you remember, we had schools over the years that were level 1. However, whatever your lowest performing school was, is what the district was
Right.
categorized
Right,
as.
it's not like that anymore.
And so that's where they were providing assistance, depending on what your levels, how you were designated as a district.
So they're trying to look at the performance of the district as a whole, as opposed to, and, you know, that lowest performing being the end-all be-all of your district.
From that standpoint, whether you're looking at the old accountability system or the new accountability system, assistance from DESI is not necessarily coming our way on this type of thing.
Right.
It's going to go to other districts where they may have far more challenging situations.
And our data, you have it in your slides, it's hard to see
So
here.
this is our data, and you can see sort of how it breaks out.
I have another copy if someone wants to look. Everything in your slides.
Does anyone want a copy?
Actually, yeah.
No, I can see it.
Can you
I
see
can
it?
it on,
Okay.
I can see it on. the
And,
computer.
you know, this is right off of the district profile, but it's
Right.
public.
Right, so this is people, when they go to the
That's good.
district profiles, this is what they'll see. And it's not immediately straightforward in terms of, as you look at it comprehensively, but I mean, a couple highlights that you see, especially in ELA, you're seeing where we're getting 4 out of 4 points, or 3 out of 4 points, in grades 3 through 8 there, aggregate, and then lowest performing, and then high school, both for lowest performing and all students, they're getting 4 out of 4 points. What I was pointing to was the one below that, where you see our aggregate, we got 0 out of 4 points, and so this is how closely they're monitoring these targets. So remember, Next Gen MCAS is what grades 3 through 8 are taking. So our aggregate score or achievement on the previous results, Next Gen MCAS was 501.3. And last year, the second time our students ever took it, the aggregate was 500.7. So that 0.6 downward trend cost us all 4 points. So that might be something where we provide some feedback.
Oh, really?
You know, where you're looking at something where the students have been exposed to this new type of assessment for 2 years, and that small a decline allows you to get 0 in that category for, or accumulates to 0. So there was a little bit of frustration. Less so right now when I'm on camera at a school committee meeting, but there was, there was some more frustration when we first discussed this. However, as you continue to go through, you see areas where we're doing quite well in this new accountability system and gaining 3 or 4 of the points. And on both sides, I would point out, take a look at you know, the column 3, whether it be the 3 through 8 students or the high school students. We're seeing our lowest performing students actually achieving quite well. So they're hitting their targets.
They are, but then, like, when you look at the all screen, the all students non-high school that are not lowest performing, the lowest performing appear to be doing better.
Mhm.
But are they doing at the same, they're not doing at the same level, they're just doing better at their level?
Their targets are different.
Okay.
Correct, yeah. So the aggregate target, as I said, for math was based on the 501.3, and we hit as an aggregate in math 500.7, and that cost us all 4 points. That's where it becomes a little picayune in my opinion, but
Anyways.
the accountability system is something we're all beginning to understand and implement, and we'll provide feedback as we go along.
Right, because with this, what happens next?
The reality is, for us,
That segue.
yeah, that's a great segue. There's not a lot that happens from the state level in terms of what or how DESI works with East Long Meadow. But for us, I think as you look at our SMART goals, it's going to be how we start to dig in and look at that and figure out, you know, maybe it's not the instructional practices that we're using. Maybe we don't know enough about our students whom we need to engage well. And so learning more about them may help us put better instructional practices in place.
Did the target just move again?
The target will be set up again for next year based on our results this year.
Right, but just with this whole system, are we looking at something different than we were looking before? Will the end result be different? It probably will, because we're looking at.
Yeah, targets are different. I mean, we're very aware when the high school starts to take the next gen MCAS, our achievement levels will come down.
Yeah.
Similar
As will
to,
the rest of the state.
I know.
Yeah.
And when I know in the past, and it's changed, probably changed since, my guys were in the elementary. In the past, if you wanted to, I'll use one of my kids back from kindergarten as an example. She was having some eyesight issues, and very quietly, kindergarten teacher said, we're just gonna take her and have her go to Mrs. Rattay, and big deal. Because if she tried to do it through the process you're supposed to do, it was gonna take a half of a year. She got her in, she was there for 5 weeks, she got her out, the world was great. Are we streamlining processes like that?
That's
If
what we're-
teachers are coming in and saying, I have a concern, are we getting that kid pulled out? Or does it take months of, you need to have information and
The
planning
whole
and all of
RTI
this?
model is supposed
It
to
is.
be,
Streamline.
yeah,
And it
and
has-
flexible, and also a place where students can get the help they need and then move on,
Okay.
and not get
Right.
stuck.
All right, so they kind of move in and they move out.
Yes,
They-
it's different than the special ed process,
Okay.
and
As
that-
you've seen us report, say at the mid-cycle or the end of
Yep.
the year, when we talk about interventions, it's, and you often will hear either Dr. Allen or Mrs. Santinello or Mr. Fredette, they'll talk about people that exited,
Okay.
Yeah.
that's what we're
And
talking
they're quick,
about.
because I knew at the middle school, I knew that at the Birchland level, it was kind of a quick process, but I wasn't sure if the elementaries were at this point. Okay, good.
I mean, the quick part of it is based on students actually making progress. If they're
Mm-hmm.
not making progress, then we need to continue to dig
Right,
into the root cause for that
okay.
lack
All
of
right.
progress.
And that's exactly what this is about, finding that story, finding that root cause, looking at what we already have that we consider data, but also looking beyond that to see what other pieces of information that we have that we may not be utilizing. Looking at the interventions we have in place that are working and seeing if there's other things that we need to do. Like, I'm thinking of what you were saying earlier about a student who might be in math interventions. They could be in reading interventions because they don't do well across the board. Is it an academic issue or is it social emotional? So, those kinds of things. And then just how can we improve Tier 1 instruction, that's instruction in the classroom,
Right,
in
across the
general,
board.
to hit all of our students and give them what they need before they even need interventions.
Right.
Right.
So those are all the things, and that's the cool thing about this accountability is that we're already there, and we're already doing what we need to be doing, and we're just gonna keep improving on the system.
Okay, cool.
I think our model that we went to last year for professional development, where we were finally able to get that second full professional development day. So now we have 2 full professional development days where teachers come in, they've been vested, and they're learning different instructional practices that they can utilize really the next day with students.
Okay.
And so that, we're hoping, is going to continue, and I think the goals that we've developed should, and action steps probably more importantly, should allow that to continue across the district.
What types of supports are in place for building level administrators to really understand the data at each of the 4 sites so that they're able to then ensure that those professional development
Sure.
practices are aligned to what the data is actually saying they need to be aligned to?
So first, what we do is we generally will address it at a leadership team meeting, and we're looking at it's a little bit more global, just as you're indicating. And then the buildings go in and dive in even more, and I'm sure Mrs. Brown can speak to this. They'll dive in with their academic coaches and look at, okay, what does this mean? What should we be doing? It would be great if we could employ a middle school model in every building, because that allows for more meeting time. And so the middle school has the opportunity not only to dig in a little bit more around what their students are doing, what challenges they can identify, but they have actual built-in time each week where they can go meet with teams. And so that becomes a little bit more challenging at the other schools. We're doing it, but it's not as consistent as you have with your team time at a middle school.
And then during our leadership time, we are going to go through a cycle of inquiry together and go through a whole data cycle. So that would help us kind of get on the same page and then better support teachers and coaches in that work as well.
So each building level administrator would have an opportunity to sit with the leadership team at the district and kind of discuss
We
the
do it as a-
current
we
data?
do it as a group.
Okay, so
And
everyone's
then
seeing each other's
what-
data.
Right,
at the
and
same
then
time.
what we do, often if we've done it as a full group in this type of square, we
Okay.
may then break out by levels.
Okay.
And then they get to work and talk about that. And then they have meetings in their buildings. And one of the great things we brought into the district probably 5-6 years ago is then looking at what are other teachers doing? You know, we call them learning walks. Next to the middle schools now call them walk-arounds. I always think that's like an Australian term.
Yeah, about
That's walkabout.
Roundabout.
But, you know, what are other staff members doing that's seeming to make a difference?
Yeah, and that's data
So it's
too.
that type of thing. So I think this, this book study and, say that, what'd you call it?
cycle of inquiry. data
Cycle of
cycle.
inquiry
Yeah.
that Mrs. Brown's bringing to the leadership team. It's really gonna have us question, are we looking at the right data? And should we be expanding that?
Sure.
And I think that's gonna be really helpful for the entire team because it's gonna force us to, again, self-reflect and question, why do we do this again?
Right.
You know, is it just because we always have done it? And is it effective?
And I'm sure looking for consistencies across instructional practices in terms of being
Right.
able to say, we do have success if we look at the English language arts achievement, but when we're looking at math across non-high school students, high school students, lowest performing, non-lowest performing, and being able to target what interventions would be best utilized across all the sites so
Right.
that all students are having access to that same high quality, not just tier 1 instruction, but your tier 2 and your
Right.
tier 3 to ensure that if it's working at Maple Shade, make sure it's working at
Right.
Mountain View, so that those consistent intervention practices are in place.
And actually, around that, the coaches meet on Fridays to go through what's going on in the district and how are we best supporting our teachers. And so they're sharing different things that are going on in the buildings they serve, and then bringing back possibly other things that they can do that maybe another coach thought of in their building.
Did Mountain View and Maple Shade, like say for instance, if you're on topic 5, day 3, and say Mountain
Top
View.
5 is one of my favorites.
Would you like that? I'm just using it because we're on topic 5, day 3 where I am right now. Okay, so you're topic 5 and, day 2, I should say. Day 2 will be tomorrow. Is Maple Shade and Mountain View, are they like within like a couple of days or weeks within where they're both on topic 5, day 2 or 3 or 4, or they kind of have their own little vibe that they put on?
They have more individual scheduling on a day-to-day basis, but what we've tried to do with the benchmark assessments is when we agree on the assessment schedule, they know whether it's ELA or math, they have to be to a certain spot
Okay.
by X date. And so that's, we don't want to prescribe every step that they take.
Right.
Obviously, they're using similar curriculum, so that piece already does to a certain extent that, but then you want to give teachers some freedom to look at the students in front of him or her and say,
But
give
the
you an
benchmark
example.
assessments are there and they're at the same time.
Yeah, and it's more around yes, I
Okay.
mean, that always drives quite a lot. So
Okay.
from a teaching standpoint, you always kind of look ahead, what's your end point and how do I get there? But it's also recognizing, in some cases, say in math, they may want to, depending on the group in front of them, they may want to shift which unit goes first, instead of, just because the book starts
Yeah, I
with
know,
this
sometimes
unit.
they're
They may
backwards.
have to
I
shift
know.
it depending
Yeah.
on what the needs are and
Right.
with the students in front of them.
Okay,
So
thank
they're
you.
required to teach the same standards.
Right,
But the order and the methodology is not standardized.
okay.
And we've all agreed on the priority standards, but that discussion continues. And so each year, if we're feeling that we need to add or revise what we're agreeing upon, we can.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a few other booklets here if you're interested. Summary of the Next Generation District and School Accountability System. So.
You can pass them
If you make copies, we'll take them. It's something
Is
you
that the
gotta
other
look
one
at
that
though,
we already got?
the
Yeah.
light's bright and.
And then,
It
just not
is-
to inundate you with paper, but the last one I'm handing out actually has those rubrics at the end if you're
I know
interested.
that you want a copy.
Just
Sure.
recycle if
Yeah.
you're not.
Yeah.
All right, we'll put one in this box.
Yeah, I know, he'll want it all.
We were gonna do a PowerPoint just on the rubrics for Mr. Ficero, because I know he would really like that.
No.
We're going to do a PowerPoint on the resolutions. I'll send it to
Yeah,
you.
there you go. Quite a few of those tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I hope they settle in with this and they stop playing games. It's been, how many years now?
Which
Sorry.
one?
Well, the accountability system has been around for quite a while.
No, but I'm talking about the whole,
Yeah, I mean, figuring out
Yeah.
what the next assessment is gonna be is
Yes,
probably the
yes.
last 5 years.
yeah.
And
So-
now we have the next gen MCAS and feeling excited about it.
So happy you are.
Yeah. I mean,
Steal from an old Levi's commercial, feeling groovy.
okay.
There are grooves in Levi's, is that why they feel groovy? They're just-
And that was a commercial way back in the late 70s, I think. Feeling groovy, you put on your new Levi's,
Oh, yeah.
you're feeling groovy.
Yep.
74, I was 6 years old, they said, 5 years old, they said.
God, I loved my Levi's back in the day.
Yes.
Everybody loved Levi's.
Okay, we're
Tangents that I can take
here.
people on.
Yeah.
Had to take an entire
Brain
meeting
break
off
between
track.
accountability
That's
and.
nice, sounds good.
There you go.
Thank you for that presentation.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
What's the matter?
I said you got some practice earlier.
Yes, I
That's
did. Yes, we had a-
Not you weren't
No,
the
we had
practitioner there,
an
but.
interesting meeting with some of the department heads today. I
We'll leave
probably
that
should have
there,
thrown
too,
out
or-
the groovy.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, we have a donation this evening.
So in your packet, you'll see that there's a letter from Principal Elaine Santinello, and she is saying that St. Michael's Church kindly donated a buddy bench in memory of Alex Blaze. With your permission, Mountain View would be honored to accept the bench and place it on the playground for all Mountain View students to enjoy,
That's great.
which is really great.
It is.
A beloved student and
Oh,
Yeah.
missed very much.
I move that we accept the buddy bench donated by St. Michael's Church on behalf of Alex Blaze.
Motion made
Second.
and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, no. Motion carries 4-0.
Thank you.
They're putting that in the chips for the playgrounds?
They're gonna put it in the playground,
Is
yeah.
it go in the ground?
I think
I
they're
believe
going
so,
to,
that's the
yeah.
Great,
plan, yeah.
great.
I think DPW is probably
They can
gonna help us with that, yeah.
That's
Yeah,
great.
they always partner and help us.
That's great.
Yeah.
Cool.
They really want it to be something that people use and see the use of it.
I always look for the bench when I go to for the playscapes. My kids are on. I
Yeah.
want to go sit down on the bench.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Yeah.
you know?
Now you might have a buddy, come over and
Maybe
sit
I'll
next
go
to
Well, I
you.
think
go.
that was the plan too, and for kids who felt like they didn't have anyone to play with, they could
Right.
sit on the buddy bench and
Right.
then people
Nice.
would know to look.
There you go.
Nice. Cool, very nice. Okay, we have a creation of a scholarship fund.
So again, you have a letter in your packet from Dr. Flanagan, principal of the high school, and she's asking, well, she's stating, the family of Mr. Maurice Martin, also someone who's very beloved, has requested that donations in Mo's memory be accepted by the high school for the purpose of establishing a scholarship fund in his name. The criteria for the scholarship will be determined by the family in the near future, with the presentation to take place at the Student Achievement Night.
That's the one in
Donations, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Student Achievement Night,
Right.
right? Donations are being accepted and logged for the family in a spreadsheet for acknowledgement, and the scholarship will be ongoing until the funds have been depleted. So, they would
Do
like to
we
request
normally
you.
create an account for such a thing? For most of the scholarships are not an East Long Meadow held account, is that correct?
No, most of them are, they're at the.
For Achievement
the
Night?
town,
So then-
well, a lot of them are not,
Okay, that's why I'm asking.
variety,
Some-
so.
Some are managed
some-
outside of us.
That's correct.
I think the family is asking us to
manage
manage
it.
this
So-
money. So we would have
We have
to,
others, though.
Yes,
We do some of them.
That's correct, so it goes
Okay.
through the town hall, and I work with the town accountant's office requesting funds, and we
Mm-hmm.
always get, requests from the high school at the time when, the word is coming.
Achievement
Thank
Awards
you.
Night.
Yeah.
Sports night, yes.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
we were hoping they would give permission for this account to be set up.
Move to allow the East Long Meadow High School to create a scholarship fund in memory of Mr. Morris Martin.
All right, I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries 4-0.
Great, thank you. I'll take care of those for you.
We have some MASC resolutions.
Okay. As I've done in the past, I will just kind of like read the rationale because I assume that everybody has kind of just glanced through these. I will let you know that I do sit on the resolutions committee, and there were actually 17 resolutions presented to the resolutions committee this year.
Jeez.
So.
Thank you for
I'm
screening
also-
those.
Yeah. Makes you feel a little bit better. I'm also on the MASC Board of Directors, as you know, and we have the final say on what resolutions go forward to the delegate assembly. So our role tonight is once again to direct me on how to vote on each one of these, and what I will read as far as Resolution 1, rejecting the arming of educators, and the rationale here is the safest environment would be to provide additional mental health resources and violence prevention in public schools. And, you know, I throw that out for discussion, but I think, you know, this one's kind of obvious. We don't want guns in schools, and to give everybody a history, these resolutions get forwarded to the state legislature by our legal counsel, Stephen Finnegan, who is also our lobbyist, and he will provide testimony if and when these resolutions actually get signed into bills that a number of legislators will sponsor. So this process, when we vote at the conference, will just authorize these to be forwarded to the legislature for whatever they decide to act on. So that's just describes the process.
Do we want to go through all 7 and then vote? Or
No,
would
they
you
actually
like-
have to be voted.
I know
individually.
separately, but how do we typically do it? Do we go one at a time now?
Yeah,
We'll
yeah.
vote on the first one?
Vote on the first one
After
and then
we've just
we'll
spoken
vote.
about
Yeah.
it? Okay.
Generally,
Does
that's
anybody
what
have
we
any questions on the first one? And MASC is recommending.
Yeah, the Board of Directors is recommending that this go forward and be approved at the delegate
It's
assembly.
actually submitted by the board.
Yeah, it is submitted, because what this is a combination of 4 different resolutions that were submitted to us, so we kind of gave it to the Board of Directors, and then we met 2 nights after the Resolutions Committee met, and we brainstormed and whittled this down into one, because having 4 resolutions speak about the same topic is
Right.
just a little bit too redundant, so we kind of picked and chose what pieces we wanted to form one resolution.
Okay, so how do we move this? We would say,
Move to direct me to vote in the affirmative or negative.
okay, I move to direct William Fonseca to, oh, we have to vote on it first, right? Right?
Well, so, right, I would just,
Ourselves
The
personally,
motion-
what we want.
the motion is to support the East
To
Long Meadow
support it, and
School
then we
Committee
vote.
Yeah,
support
and
that would direct
resolution
me-
number 1, and then
Yeah, that would
it's the
direct me.
affirmative or the negative.
Okay, so I
And-
move to support resolution number 1
As presented.
as presented,
Yeah, I mean, you could name the title of it.
Yeah, but,
rejecting the arming of educators.
Yes.
okay.
So a motion has been made
I'll second it.
and seconded. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries to support resolution 1.
Okay, resolution 2 is small and rural districts. Massachusetts has a number of small and rural school districts that have special academic, social, financial, and operational needs, and yet operate with the enviable measure of success. And, you know, it goes through a number of whereases, and then the last line is, therefore be it resolved that MASC call for creation of a working group to advise the legislature on the best public policy solutions to support small and rural school districts, and further that this working group propose modifications to the foundation budget and other elements of Chapter 70 Financial Assistance Program, designate special instances whereas excessive regulation interfere with the ability of school leaders to direct the academic improvement of children, identify and advise on eligibility for state and federal programs to support public education, and find strategies to ameliorate the impact of forces that jeopardize growth, stability, and the success of these school districts. And further, MASC oppose legislation or unlegislated regulations that would attempt to undermine the right of any city, town, or regional district to have to impose a mandate to restructure, expand, regionalize, or dissolve the school district without its consent. There's a lot of verbiage here, a lot of dialogue here. Basically, it's there is a movement in the state legislature to start treating regional school districts a little bit differently and hold them to their, and as far as
To encourage
distribution.
them?
It's
Or
encouraging them, but the Chapter 70 formula won't support it. So that's why there's a big pushback, because there's such a great difference in how they would allocate the funding.
A higher percentage to regional districts?
No, a lower percentage.
Lower percentage, really?
Lower percentage.
Why? Do you know?
They feel that they can do things more efficiently by regionalizing.
Oh, so they're actually penalized in terms of Chapter 70
Yes.
funding?
Yep.
All right then. Well, we're not going to regionalize anytime soon, but we can certainly vote on resolution number 2.
Okay, I move to accept. What are we doing at resolution number 2?
Support.
Support,
Support.
resolution number 2, small and rural districts.
Motion made
Second?
and seconded. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those
Aye.
opposed, no. Motion carries 4-0. Number 3.
Elimination of the Federal Department of Education. This is kind of, I don't want to get into a huge political
It's at the federal level.
discussion. It's at the federal level.
Right.
They want to do away with the Department of Elementary, they want to do away with the Department of Education and come up with,
Combine it.
they want to combine it and then make a lot of the competitive grants and vouchers and just change, like, blow up the funding mechanism and everything else that comes out of it.
Right. We don't want that. Well, I don't. What do you got, Beth?
Yeah, I mean, and this is the MASC created this?
No, they're
Yeah.
looking to.
Or is it a group that, a bunch of things thought of it and you guys combined?
Well, this has been on the back burner since the current administration in the federal government took their offices 2 years ago. So it's just
Okay.
kind of, there's really a push to change the funding mechanisms, the way federal funding is distributed, and one of them is to eliminate the Department of Education.
All right, I move to accept resolution number 3, elimination of the Federal Department of Education.
You meant support.
Support,
Yep.
yes.
Yep.
Motion made
Second.
and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, no.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. And 104.
Regional school transportation. Again, a lot of these don't directly affect us, but we get to vote on them anyway. Therefore, be it resolved to promote greater competition for bus service contracts, the legislature should eliminate MGL section 71(7)(c) and authorize a deeper analysis of the lack of bidders on school transportation contracts.
Isn't that the truth? Yeah,
I
there's a
think
lot of
if you can
talk.
speak on this,
Well, I mean, recently I was at a meeting and there's a lot of talk about, it was a retirement party for a business manager, and there's just a lot of talk that they're going out for bid and they're only getting like one
Yeah.
bidder, maybe two.
Yeah.
They do like a pre-bid where they have them come in and it's done oftentimes so they can answer any questions that the bidders might have. And there might be 5 or 6 in the audience and, you know, we're told that there's no collusion being done. That's always one of the forms
Yeah.
that are supposed to come back when
Yeah.
you go out to bid from the vendors. It just makes you wonder what's really going on because they're not really crossing other districts. So it's a lot, it's a big topic and it's being
It is.
talked about a lot, yep. So, and I know Jay Sullivan from DESI
Yeah.
was listening to a lot of that conversation and is well aware. So I'm not surprised to see this.
Interesting. Okay.
All right, I move to, what have I been saying, accept?
Support.
Support, thank you, write it down. Support resolution 4, regional school transportation.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries 4-0. 5.
reporting and accountability standards, a little timely topic. Therefore, be it resolved that the Massachusetts Association of School Committees works with the legislature and the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education to ensure that all students or persons in schools They receive public funds under the authority of the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education or a local public school district are held to the same standards and requirements in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Makes sense.
Yep.
Go ahead, Sarah. Peter, do it, go, quick. You're sleeping over
I
there.
wrote the word support down so I remember.
I move to support Resolution 5, reporting and accountability standards.
Motion made.
I'll second.
And seconded. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries 4-0. Number 6.
Reproductive health education. Therefore, be it resolved that the Massachusetts Association of School Committees supports evidence-based reproductive health curricular. Further, we call upon U.S. Department of Education and executive branch to stop their support of abstinence-only education. Again, another politically charged topic. Unfortunately, the federal politics is starting to make its way down to the state levels now, which is kind of sad that we need to address these things.
So how are we personally currently, I mean, we've got, I think, a pretty overarching, well-rounded health curriculum in our system that is doing more than just.
Yeah.
All right, so
Do it.
I move to support Resolution 5, reporting and sorry, I'm up.
6.
Sorry.
6.
Resolution 6, reproductive health and education.
Second?
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those
Aye.
opposed, no. Motion carries 4-0. Number 7.
Gender identity inclusive athletic participation policy. This was submitted by the Framingham School Committee, and we're really surprised that they didn't, they usually come forward with a book of them, because Framingham is like the crossroads in the state where they get a little bit of everything. So, the rationale for this is the at-risk behavior for LGBTQ students, which includes suicidal ideation, is sharply reduced when some basic interventions take place. With federal laws that are vague with protections for our vulnerable students, public schools in Massachusetts should take steps to ensure their protection. With the guidance from the legislature, LGBTQ students throughout Massachusetts will have better protection and will have reduced adverse behaviors. This one just speaks to allowing students to choose their gender identity when participating in athletics.
Right.
It's a hot topic across the country.
And I think the MIA supports this as well.
I know, yes, they do.
My only concern is, and I don't have a problem with it, is, it says protecting privacy, providing access to gender-neutral restrooms, locker rooms, private stalls, whatever. And I feel like, okay, I know that we've got a bathroom, or maybe two, and I guess when you get to the point of swim team, or like, are we putting the school systems that need to figure it out? Obviously, you've got to figure this problem out. Are we putting, is that putting them in undue, like, they've got to come up with a place? Because if you're after school, the nurse's office isn't going to be open to say, here's a good safe spot, it's kind of gender neutral, or, I guess that would be my only concern, is it needs to be done. But if something like this goes through, are they going to give the school systems time? You have old buildings
Oh,
that
I'm
don't
sure-
have
I'm
this
sure
stuff.
that
I mean,
Schools are already putting this in place.
Are they already
Yeah.
doing it?
We're
Okay.
putting it in place, schools throughout the Commonwealth are putting this in place.
They are,
Yeah.
okay.
But they're doing it on
it
their,
needs to get done, but
Right.
it's just,
this is all happening,
It's actually
to
been
Gordon's
a,
point.
yeah, it's been a DESI advisory for quite a while.
right,
It
but
has, okay.
there's no teeth behind it because it's coming from DESI,
right.
it's not coming from the legislature. So
Right.
we're kind of throwing it at the legislature, saying you guys need to deal with this.
Okay, all right.
So that's where the resolution comes from.
DESI's asked us to deal with it far before this.
And I'm sure a lot of school districts, to your point, Beth, are dealing with it, because, if this ever, something like this will gain steam, especially being, it's partially an election topic. So it may gain a little bit of legs in January when they can reconvene.
Okay.
So districts that aren't addressing it are gonna be in
Because there's
trouble.
both sides, you know
Yes,
what I
there
mean?
is.
It's
Oh,
not
yeah.
just one-sided issue, and it's a both side kind
Right.
of thing, and that's, okay, cool.
Okay,
I support, I move to support Resolution 6, reproductive, again, a lot of
Seven.
spots, so
Seven.
scrolling down, Resolution 7. I move to support Resolution 7, gender identity, inclusive athletic participation policy.
Second?
Motion made and seconded, further discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, no. Motion carries 4-0. Resolution 8.
sports wagering. Therefore be it resolved that the Massachusetts Association of School Committees requests that, should the general court enact legislation to legalize wagering on sporting events, the general court shall commit a portion of the revenues generated from sports wagering to public education. This is in response to the millionaire's tax being declared unconstitutional. Right now, the state is always saying, we need new revenue streams, we need new revenue streams. Well, there's two that are out there. One of them is the recreational marijuana tax. They're not, no one's sure if the legislature's gonna take this gaming up or not in their next session. There's talk that they will. There's pressure from outside organizations because a lot of other states around us have legalized it, so. It's just, what this is saying is, if this gets legalized, we wanna be part of the discussion for distributing the funds.
Right.
It's not supporting it, it's not supporting it, it's just
Right.
saying,
Certainly not supporting wagering on
Schools.
schools.
right,
That's right.
Just to be clear.
no, this is just saying, we wanna be at the table when you guys start divvying up the funds.
That's good. Somebody have a motion?
I move to support Resolution 8, sports wagering.
Second.
Motion made
See, I'm
and seconded.
scrolling to look at stuff and then I.
You're got it.
Yeah,
You're all
I
right.
know.
Good
Nice
work.
job.
With motion made and seconded, further discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries 4-0.
And the last one, access to information for parents and students who are clients of special education. There seems to be some confusion on how some districts will give paper copies and more information in other districts. I know who in particular wrote this, and she's been advocating for this for a long time and is getting pushback from everybody, so she finally said, you know what, we'll go to the legislature. So therefore be it resolved that MASC urges the legislature to amend state law that require that parents and students be provided with a copy via email or mail of all assessments that are performed for students in the family's preferred language at least 5 days prior to any meeting at which parents and students will review a proposed individual education plan. We just want to get the information.
Heck,
emanated
yeah,
on it.
oops, sorry.
Do we do that now, though?
We-
5 days
yeah,
before?
we generally
In the preferred
follow that.
language?
But-
Yep.
Of
Not all
assessments?
districts,
Of all assessments.
If
that,
they ask, or just anyway, we do it anyway?
No, anything that's gonna be discussed at the meeting.
Yep.
some districts just don't do it.
Right.
So this is kind of like putting the
And the
onus.
parents don't know that they can get it either.
Right.
You can't really say,
True.
ooh, it's yours, nobody wants to say it,
Right.
Yeah.
so.
It's a
Yeah.
good friend of
It
mine
is-
from
it
an
is
urban
theirs.
district.
You're absolutely right.
It is
Yeah.
theirs, yeah.
Yeah,
Sort of like
urban
medical
district.
records.
Right.
So,
So I move to support Resolution 9, access to information for parents and students who are clients of special education.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion carries 4-0.
that's all I've got.
That's it. Thank you, Bill, for your thoroughness on that. Good luck at the voting.
Oh, yeah, they moved it to Friday afternoon, it ought to be interesting.
Do
Keeping
they
you there?
really?
Huh?
We're gonna have you there
I
Friday
can't drive,
afternoon.
but
Well, I
this is
gotta
the
stay
Friday I
Friday.
can't go,
I gotta stay
see?
Friday night anyway for the last dinner, so. I'm there till Saturday morning, right?
So, just one quick thing. On number 3,
Yeah.
I just want to clarify, because the way that's presented and the way you voted on it, I want to be, I don't know if it makes a difference,
Let's see.
but the perception to me was that you voted to support the elimination of the Department
Right.
of Education, and I know that's not what you meant to do.
No.
Okay,
It's a
Because
combination.
the
It's
way
the-
the resolution is written
Yeah.
says that the resolution is to reject any effort to eliminate
Right,
the department.
Right.
But that's not the way the motion or the vote was stated, so
Well, the motion was to
support the
support
resolution.
the resolution.
three.
But
The way the resolution was explained.
Ah,
the
Well, we
wording
did talk
was
about
off,
the
so I can-
elimination.
We
yeah.
talked about the elimination.
No, I appreciated the clarification.
Yeah.
So,
Because-
yeah, we're not asking for the elimination of the Department of
No.
Education. We're looking,
So I just don't know if we
Yep.
want to do that again, or at least make
no,
that point.
I appreciate that.
Yes.
No, I think
It
with
was
the
not clear
clarification,
when it happened.
okay.
thank you.
I think we're
Thank
okay
you.
with our motion in terms of supporting a resolution, but I appreciate the
Yeah.
the
So
point
we-
of
They,
clarification.
they will
Support
explain that on the
resolution
floor,
three.
won't
Oh,
they?
there'll be
Resolution three.
numerous, there's gonna be numerous questions on some of these. Some of these are like no-brainers, but they have allotted 45 minutes for this delegate assembly. There's no way it's gonna happen in
Nope,
45
could be late
minutes.
for dinner.
So the support, or the vote that was taken here, where we're supporting Resolution 3, that ultimately would be to reject any notion
Correct.
of combining the U.S. Department of Education with other government departments.
Correct.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
And we have one more order of business to approve a out-of-state field trip
Yes.
for.
It's for a 7th grade Sapphire team. They would like to go to the Connecticut Science Center in Hartford, Connecticut. They're looking to do so on November 15th. And they break down that they're going to have roughly 14 chaperones, about 109 students, and their estimated cost around $25 a student. They break down in the letter as well the different standards that this would hit as they take that trip.
I move to approve the 7th grade Sapphire field trip to the Connecticut Science Center in Hartford, Connecticut for November 15th, 2018.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Sarah, I don't know if we've ever clarified any out-of-state field trip we approve, any in-state field trip we don't, just so you know what we're looking at.
Anything across the state lines.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, those opposed, no. And motion carries 4-0. Anything else tonight? Everybody's good?
That is it, yeah.
Okay, Don, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jake, thank you for being here, as always. And I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion made
A second.
and seconded. Discussion, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, those opposed, no. Motion carries 4-0. Thank you, and good night.